I'm willing to give it back to you. Amen. Mother's Day brings a lot of memories. Well, I got memories of my mother, don't you?
Amen.
They're not all good. Let me tell my mother she's dead. She won't get me for it. I can remember one time being at the house and we sat down to eat. And my dad says, well, I don't think we need to pray over this. It's already been blessed once. And my mom got up and left. Wasn't happy about that at all. That happened a couple different times. My mom was very sensitive about her cooking. And if you complained about it, it was bad news for you. Before I was even a thought, my dad was dating my mother, and he walked down to her house, and she was in the kitchen making cookies, and he walked past her knowing he had to go say hi to her mom, and he saw what she's doing, and he said, well, my mom doesn't do it that way. And he kept on going, went on in, said hi to her mom. He kept thinking, where's the cookies? Where's the cookies? Where's the cookies? Finally, he went out to the kitchen. He said, where's the cookies? She said, over the hill. I didn't make them the way your mother made them. Woo! Let's be honest, women are delicate, frail creatures. And sometimes the monster comes out. The monster came out on my mother on more than one occasion, probably because the devil in me made her do it. And I can remember getting spanked by my mom. Monica, did your mother spank you? Would you rather have a spanking from your mom or your dad?
Or my mom.
Oh, your mom? Not me. When my mother spanked you, you knew it. And you didn't want to have another one until the next day at least. Because I promise you I had one almost every day of my life until I was married and she couldn't do it anymore. Well, it wasn't that long, but it felt like it. Oh my word. I can remember getting spanked by my mom and counting. 14, 15, 16. I don't think it ever went past 16, but that's because by then her arm wore out. Well, why do I start out by saying such terrible things about my mother? Let's just be honest. We live in a real world and there's real people in a real world. And even the best of mothers aren't perfect. And some mothers are very imperfect. Some people have lousy mothers. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. What we usually do is we make jokes at lousy dads, because you know, deadbeat dads, that's the thing. And people say unkind things about them, but they usually only say nice things about mothers. I come across a story about a little boy who had went to school, and while he was at school, his dog got hit by a car. He'd forgotten he left the dog outside. The dog's name was Laddie. The little boy got back home from school, and the mother didn't hardly know how to approach it with him. Finally, she decided she just had to do it. She said, son, come in the kitchen here, I got to talk to you. She said, while you were at school, Laddie got hit by a car and is dead. The little boy said, oh, okay. And he went upstairs and started playing. And the mother thought, well, what's the story with that? Well, his sister came home and went upstairs, and she proceeds to tell him the story about how Laddie was dead, and the boy is inconsolable. He's screaming and crying and having a fit. And the mother thought, what in the world is wrong with him? I already told him. She went upstairs and she said to him, son, what is the matter with you? I already told you. In the kitchen. He said, yeah, but I thought you said Daddy is dead. That's an awful story. That's terrible. But it illustrates the perceptions that we have in America, where the mothers are the saints and the dads are the evil ones, you know, and they can't be missed when they're gone. God has a role for both mother and father. And we live up to the expectations God has for us, or we fall short of them, according to whether or not we follow His Word. And for that reason, this morning I want to take my text from an unusual place about some mothers that you probably won't hear many people talking about this morning. In 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 3. Because this morning I'm going to preach a message about imperfect mothers. Imperfect mothers. God and imperfect mothers. But at the end of it, I hope that this gives us all some hope. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse number 16 is where we're going to start. We'll read through verse number 28. 1 Kings chapter 3. Now, two women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. Now, verse 28 at the very end says, she is his mother. So when we start out this story, we're starting out a Mother's Day story about two prostitutes, two hookers. The word in the King James is a harlot. And so from the very beginning, we get the idea that these mothers are a far cry less than what a person could hope for a mother. In fact, most people would look down on them instantly because their reputation would precede them. The one woman said, "Oh, my Lord, this woman and I dwell in the same house." Well, they must have got along halfway decent. They were in the same profession. They lived in the same place. Can I just speculate for a moment? I think they were friends. It'd be like if you found some hookers downtown and two of them always stood by each other. They're friends. These two women were friends. They lived together in the same place, and they cared about each other to some extent. And they were in it together. We dwelled in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. They didn't have protection like we do today. And so, if you were a prostitute, most likely you're going to have a lot of illegitimate children. There she is. She's giving birth. Then it happened the third day after I had given birth that this woman also gave birth. And we were together. No one was with us in the house except the two of us in the house. Now she keeps emphasizing that they're alone except for the two of them. She didn't call for a midwife. Probably they didn't want anything to do with her, Sister Matthews. She was a woman of ill repute. So the only person that she had to help her when it's time for her to have a child is somebody just like her. And then 3 days later, she's helping her give birth. They have these children together. They might have conceived at the same time. You never know. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. I'm reading this out of the New King James Version. King James says overlaid. But it means she rolled over and laid on him and got smothered. This woman's son died in the night because she laid on him. Now let's just talk about that for a moment. That'll be a horrible thing. But why do you think that mother had that child right next to her in bed? What'd you say? She might not have another bed. And she loves this little baby. They might not have had heat in their house at night. She's keeping that baby warm. She cares about this child. And in the process of caring for this child and loving this child, somebody's rolled over on top of this baby and smothered it to death. Well, you know, she deserved that, didn't she? She was a harlot after all. And you just figure God got her. No. What a horrible tragedy. What a horrible thing. Sometimes we might be tempted to say, well, Lord, why did a bad thing happen to me? It should have happened to so-and-so. But if I stand here and tell you this story and I say, well, she deserved it, you should instantly shrink back and say, nobody deserves this. It's just one of the tragedies that happens In life, nobody deserves to lose their baby. That's not a deserved thing. It's just part of the curse. And we're stuck with it from the moment we're born. Sin and death. So she arose in the middle of the night and took my son by my side. Took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. So this is the accusation. This woman's a heavy sleeper, by the way. Somebody, Brother Matthew says she might have been drunk. I don't know. Hey, I don't know. Could be. We're talking about imperfect mothers here. Could have been. Could have been. So a switch presumably has occurred. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was dead. But when I had examined him in the morning, indeed he was not my son whom I had born. Now I'm just going to tell you how I think this story played out. I think that woman woke up to nurse her son. And that doesn't always happen in the morning when the light's out. That could be any time. After midnight in the morning. Something seemed wrong. Because usually a baby's going to cry and get your attention. And so she wakes up to nurse her child in the morning, and her child's dead. Now, imagine if that was you. Are you going to say, oh, my child is dead, and just be, no. She falls apart right then and there. My baby's dead, my baby's dead. She's crying about it. She's distraught because her child is dead. They don't have light yet to see. They couldn't just get up and flip on the switch. And that's why, apparently later in the morning, she examines the child. And that's when she discovers that's not her baby. Now, she hasn't had this baby very long, but she knows which one's hers. You know why she knows? Because she's looked that little baby in the face. She fell in love with that little baby immediately. She knew where the bumps and freckles were, and she loved every one of them. Later, that baby was going to grow up and become a teenager. Oh, I got a bump and a freckle! And the mother would be like, but I loved that bump. You know? She cared for her child. She loved this child, and she's already made a confession. My child is dead, and she's wept and she's cried, and probably disturbed some of the neighbors with her wailing and her crying at the loss of her child. See, when they come before the king, there's a reason why there's a question. Because she has already previously said, my child is dead. She's already admitted it. But in the morning, when she examines him, indeed, he was not my son whom I had born. Then the other woman said, no, but the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. You admitted it yourself that you had lost your baby. You admitted it your baby was dead. And now you're just distraught and you can't handle life without a baby and you want my baby. That's understandable. For those that have never had children, you know what it is to want somebody's child. You know the heartache of that. So either scenario is understandable. Either scenario is understandable. And the king said, the one says, this is my son who lives, and your son is the dead one. And the other one says, no, but your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one. And then the king says, bring me a sword. It wasn't one to clean out his fingernails. Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king, and the king said, divide the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other. Then the woman whose son was living spoke to the king. for she yearned with compassion for her son. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him." But the other said, "Let him be neither mine nor yours, but divide him." So the king answered and said, "Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is the mother." Mother's Day. She is the mother. She is the mother. Well, I told you there's no such thing as a perfect mother. And that's actually why I kind of ribbed on my mother-in-law from the pulpit there a moment ago, because I knew where I was going with this message. Mama, you're not perfect. You might be an angel from somewhere. I love my mother-in-law. I really do. She's a precious lady, but she does have a wart on her finger. It's called a worry wart. Sometimes Mama's worry wart causes her to boss, you know. So even this morning, as I got ready to leave the house, I'm getting ready to open up the door to go out. She goes, "You don't have the keys to the other vehicle, do you?" I'm thinking, am I the incompetent one? You know? Yes, I have the keys, and I'm taking them with me, you know. But instead, Mama says, "Well, you've done it before," and she was right. That's the worst part. She was right. I have done it before. You know? I can pull out a couple of Mama's little faults. She's a godly lady, and I appreciate her. But mothers oftentimes see their own faults. I mean, have you as a woman, as a mother, looked at some other mother and thought to yourself, "That mother has it together, and then there's me"? Sister Sip, I'm sure you felt that way before. You know, your kids are crying, you don't know how to make them shut up. Be quiet, sweetie. You know, you don't know what to do because maybe it's your first child and everybody else has more information than you, and you're thinking to yourself, "Why did God give me this baby?" You know, because I'm incompetent, I can't handle it, I don't know what I'm doing. And don't be too hard on yourself. There's no perfect mothers out there. There's no perfect mothers out there. None. You know, one of the interesting things to me about this story is that Solomon was willing to even listen to them at all. Solomon is the king of Israel, and God has blessed him with wisdom above anyone else. Imagine if I had a problem, I want to go to President Obama. I don't think they're going to let me in the door. You know, if I write him a letter, somebody else is going to write back and stamp his name on it for me. I mean, you don't get personalized attention from really, really important people. Much less if you're a shady character. I mean, these women, they weren't looked on well or highly in society. And with the depths of the imperfections that they had, Solomon cared about them. It doesn't matter if you were a hooker. God cares about you. It doesn't matter what your depths of inadequacies are. He cares. He cares. He cares. You can go to him with your imperfection, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, the truth is, those that go to him with our perfection go with self-delusion. We go with self-delusion. Solomon is concerned about these two women because God is concerned about these two women. Now, I know, because we're in the church, hallelujah moment, we're all about moral purity. And that's true. What these women were doing was sin, and it was wrong. And there were penalties in God's word for sins that are wrong. But we can't forget that we not only stand for moral purity, but we stand for compassion, and we are for people. Because God is for people. Imperfect people, immoral people, not so nice people. God cares enough for them that He's going to die for them. They weren't even living up to God's ideals, and yet God's going to give Solomon wisdom to speak into this situation. You say, but my mom's faults are too big, too many. Maybe she's got big faults. But you want to know why you should forgive your mother for her faults? Because she loved you in spite of every one of your faults. My mother loved me when I wasn't very lovable. And for certain stages of my life, that was most of the time. For other stages, it wasn't so bad. But there were times when it was rough. I would sit down at the piano and I'd play the same thing 100 times till my mother nearly thought she was going crazy. And she would say, get out of the house. Stop playing the piano. And I'd be like, but mother, I like to play the piano. I'm trying to learn. You're so mean and terrible and awful. And she's probably thinking, how does some other mother handle this perfectly? They overlook us. We have to overlook their faults too. But God gave perfect wisdom to Solomon. God is willing to give wisdom to you as a mother for whatever situation you're in. Even when your children are grown and gone, you're still the mother. And there will be times when you are overwhelmed with what is happening, and God can bring wisdom to you even though you're imperfect. I'll never forget when I was down in Marshall, Missouri, and they told us that Treva had breast cancer. And they had to dig out such a large portion on her and pack it and unpack it that her lymph nodes were exposed. You can see them under her arm. And the first time they had to unpack that, it was so much pain for my wife. And I had stepped out of the room. When I came back into the room, my wife looked at me and she said, I did not cry. And then she wept. My heart doesn't break very easy, but it broke my heart. And I got out of the hospital. I went to the car. You know who I called?
Your mom.
My mother.
Yeah.
There's a problem too big for me. I can't handle it. When I got on the phone with her, I couldn't even speak. And God gave her wisdom. She began to pray in tongues on the phone. See, God cares about imperfect mothers with overwhelming problems. And if you will let Him, He will speak to your situation.
Amen.
And He will minister no matter what you find yourself in.
Yes.
When it's too big for you, it's not too big for Him.
Amen. Yes.
He can step in on the scene, even if your situation isn't ideal. Maybe you're the stepmother. Maybe you're the adopted mother. Maybe your family doesn't work the way it's a blended. People have all kinds of strange problems in their families today. Maybe you have a special needs child, or you've got a brilliant child, and how do you handle that too? The problems happen on either end of the spectrum, and sometimes no matter how we look at it, we're not enough. We're not enough. But God is enough. And when whatever the problem it is comes your way, you can turn to Him. And if He cared for these imperfect mothers with their broken hearts in 1 Kings, He cares for you today. He cares for you today. I heard a story about a mom. She was tucking her little boy into bed, but a violent storm was happening outside, and it was thundering and it was lightning, and she got ready to turn out the light, and the little boy said with a tremor in his voice, "Mommy, will you sleep with me tonight?" And she smiled at him, and she gave him a hug, and she said, "I can't, dear. I have to sleep with your daddy." She got ready to go out of the room. The little boy was quiet for a little bit, and all of a sudden he says, "The big sissy." Only for mothers to have to deal with. There's nothing like a mother's love. There's nothing like a mother's love. A mother's love will break her heart in pieces. It will cause her to sacrifice in ways that nobody understands or sees. When there's only so much food left, she makes sure everybody else eats and then she gets the leftovers. That oftentimes happens because of a mother's love. People get married, or sometimes they don't, they have children, and all of a sudden they have to set all their personal dreams aside for the sake of the dreams of their children. A mother's love. And in the story in the scriptures today, a mother's love broke her heart so much she was willing to give away her child that she cared about. She loved that child so much she would let a woman who was a hooker take that child and raise it over losing that child to the sword. A mother's love. A mother's love. No wonder we honor mothers today. Imperfect mothers who God loves perfectly. See, Mother's Day is a secular holiday. You don't find it in the scriptures. But we recognize it anyhow because we realize that motherhood is such an important thing. And on top of it, to be a godly mother will bring so many incredible blessings down the road. We honor you. We honor you. And I believe that a mother's love should not go unnoticed, and it shouldn't go unappreciated. If your mother's still living, you tell them you love them. If your mother isn't living and you're married, you tell your wife you love her. And you teach your children to do the same. Honor thy father and thy mother. I have two deacon wives here today. I want you both come up front. The third one's downstairs working. We want to honor our mothers today. You're coming down front because I'm going to have you pass out these flowers in just a brief moment. But I would like all of our mothers to come up here. We want to pray over our mothers, a prayer of blessing.